For most of my life, even into adulthood, I felt broken. I felt like there was something inherently, deeply, intrinsically wrong with me. Because I never really felt like a woman. I didn't feel like a man either. And I never really felt sexual attraction the way other people seem to feel it. And I didn't know how to explain that to people. I remember times of crying alone to myself, thinking I was an it, feeling really ashamed for not having these connections to femininity or womanhood or attraction the way other people feel it. And I thought maybe I could fix myself by seeking this validation outside of myself, And that didn't work. But I didn't have the words to explain how I was feeling. And anytime I ever tried to explain it to anybody, usually the only way they could really, I think, understand it from their perspective was that I was lonely. That's usually how it was taken, was me trying to express loneliness. And when people wanted to cast a particularly shameful spin on that, desperation. All of this did a real number on my psychological and emotional health. It's hard not to feel incredibly ashamed of yourself when you just feel broken and inherently wrong for existing, I didn't know asexuality as an identity existed until I was in my 30s. And I didn't know agender existed as an identity until like a couple years ago, quite frankly. Despite being in around queer friends and being in the queer community, I didn't know that existed. But I will tell you, it didn't take me too long to accept these identities in myself, because when I read descriptions of them, I realized those were the words I needed all along. That's how you describe this experience. Those are the words that I didn't have before. And the weight of all that stigma really lifted, because suddenly I wasn't just uniquely broken. I was among, there's not that many of us that experience this, but there are other humans out there with this relationship to gender and with this relationship to sexual attraction. There are other people who experience this, and they've put words to that experience. And that gave it this power of normalizing it, at least within the small little subset of people, of those of us who feel this way. I still have to kind of undo some of the shame sometimes, but it really helps to alleviate it. It helps you start to unpack that and get rid of it, because it doesn't mean you're uniquely broken as a person. It just means you are a human having a different experience of the world and yourself in it. My reason for filming this is that I want to say genderqueer people exist. Trans people exist. They've always existed. They're going to keep on existing. They're going to be born. They're going to be children. And then they're going to grow into adults. And they will be trans. And this idea of making that knowledge that they exist somehow incredibly taboo, maybe illegal in some areas. If you keep that word from them, if you keep the label from them, they're never going to call themselves trans, because they won't know what to call themselves. But it's not because they don't feel trans. It's not because they are not trans. It just means they can't talk to you about it. And they will still feel all the stigma and all the shame. And if anything, it'll make it worse, because how do you even begin to explain your different experience without the words to explain it? All that negative self-talk, all the self-hatred, it's still going to be in there, whether they know it exists or not. Knowing that people exist in this world who have those identities It's not propaganda. It's not rhetoric. There's not an agenda to it. It's just people saying, hey, we exist and we're here and we've named it. And this is going to sound like hyperbole, but it's not. Knowledge that those people exist saves lives. That knowledge saves lives. Knowing you're not broken and you're not alone and you don't deserve to be alone, that saves lives. I am neurodivergent and I am also queer, yes. I had feelings, I had the identity of agender and asexuality way before I knew what those words were. As a neurodivergent and a queer person, neuroqueer, if you will, I know there's a really big overlap between queer identities and neurodivergence. And I know that for some people out there on social media with all the discourse around, that scares some people. And they're looking for a reason why. Why is there this overlap? And I can't tell you why, because my brain is wired differently, and all of my perceptions of myself, my understanding of the world, my understanding of myself in the world, all gets filtered through my differently wired brain. So I don't know. I don't know if my different experience with gender and sexuality comes from the neurodivergency or not. Because it's all pretty intertwined inside of me as an individual. But I can tell you that my feelings of those differences, my knowledge of being different, existed well before I knew how to describe it and how to talk about it. And way, way, way before I knew there were other people who experienced these differences as well. And I'm not queer because I'm impressionable or because I'm susceptible to social rhetoric and messaging or because it's cool to be queer. No, I'm queer because I am. I'm a human. I'm a different human than a lot of people out there. And queer is the word we use, or the word I use to describe it, because I've got a lot of the LGBTQIA. I got lots of letters to cover. So queer is a nice umbrella term for all of that for me. So if you're one of the people out there who's concerned about this queer and neurodivergent overlap, or this trans overlap, or gender differences overlap, you don't have to completely understand it. That's fine. But we're going to keep talking about it because we do exist. I want people to know that these identities exist because there will be a child out there somewhere who is feeling this way. And I don't want them to feel broken like I did. I want them to know there's other people feeling this way. There's other people with these identities. You don't have to understand us. I suppose you don't really have to fully accept us, I guess. It would be lovely if you did, but you don't have to fear us. Human experience is broad and incredibly diverse. And I think that diversity should exist. So just let us exist. Let the words exist. Let the knowledge exist so that we can just save more lives